In the last lecture, I talked about some of the unifying themes of the course. One of the terms we used was constrained optimization. It's the idea that everyone tries to get to the best outcome given their limited resources. But before we get too deep into the course, I want to step back and think about a bigger, crazier constrained optimization problem. Every society you can think of has the same basic problem. It has limited resources, but it's composed of people who have unlimited wants. There isn't enough wealth to give everyone their favorite car, the best health care, and so on. Goods are scarce. So now imagine you're setting up a society. How do you solve this problem? Well, it turns out different countries have tried different approaches over time, and we can learn from that. Let's start with the United States. As we'll learn, the US mostly uses what's called a market economy. Almost every good has a price, which you can see in a store or market. Firms decide to produce the good if they think they can make a profit off it, given that price and the cost of making the good. Then, consumers buy the good if they have enough money and want it badly enough, given their taste and their income. But this approach raises an important question. Why not just have the government decide who gets what? That is, why not just have what we call a central planner decide which resources go to which people? After all, we do see poverty and inequality in the United States. We'll learn more about this later too, but you don't need to take this course to know that some people in our country have very little, and some have way more than they need to survive. So why not even things out? Why not have one person make sure everyone has enough clothing, enough food, enough entertainment? This type of system is known as a command economy. And if it seems like a good idea to you, you're not alone. Throughout history, many countries have tried such an approach, but with limited success. The biggest example was the Soviet Union during much of the 20th century. In the Soviet Union during this time, the government owned the factories and farms. The government decided how much of each good to make, who worked which jobs, and who got which goods. For a while, this approach yielded impressive outcomes. During the 1930s, the Soviet Union achieved high economic growth at a time when the rest of the world was going through the Great Depression. Unemployment was, almost by definition, always low. But by the 1990s, the Soviet Union collapsed. And today, the countries that used to comprise it now mostly use market economies. Why? Well, the demands of organizing an entire economy overwhelmed the Soviet Union. It had to figure out how many shoes to produce, but also shirts and cotton and bread and oil and cars. It's an incredibly complicated problem. Soon the government couldn't keep up. It made mistakes. Not enough food got produced, and millions died due to famine. There were huge shortages of some goods and huge surpluses of others. There wasn't enough bread for everyone, so some weeks you'd get it and some weeks you wouldn't. If you needed a new car, you had to go on a waiting list. There's another problem with one central actor choosing everyone's jobs as well: corruption. The people in charge of organizing everything lived much fancier lives than everyone else. If the government didn't like you, you wouldn't get the job you wanted. Eventually, the system collapsed in on itself. A market economy is much simpler because it's decentralized. You don't need one guy making billions of decisions. Instead, each person decides for him or herself what she needs and what she can produce. It's an incredible, almost magical process. But to understand it fully, we need to go step by step to explain the magic trick. First, we'll think about how you as a consumer decide which goods to buy. Second, we'll learn how firms decide how much to produce. Third, we'll put these two together to see how the market as a whole works. And finally, we'll start to unpack the shortcomings in the market system, which, though it works better than centralized economies, has its own set of problems. We'll talk about the positive role governments can play in maintaining and supporting market economies so that they can work for all.